The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.
Brought to you by WKTV, I'm Wayne Thomas. Welcome to another Grand Rapids Ghost Hunters Paranormal Podcast. Cryptozoology, the study of animals whose existence is disputed or unsubstantiated. Folklore, modern myth, legend, supernatural omen, lake monsters, Mothman, Gargoyles O-My. It's my honor to welcome Shaytan Noir back to the studio. First, let's meet our panel. In passionate pursuit of the paranormal, Brandon Hoezee, and setting in for Kim Colleen, guest host Mary Bassett. So what is it you guys bring to the table?
I'm Brandon Hoezee of Kent County Paranormal. I've been investigating the paranormal for about 9 years now. On a couple of different teams over the years, but...
And I'm Mary Bassett. I am a channeler, a spiritualist, a psychic. I have a shop in Hastings where I do energy work and Reiki healing, along with several different other avenues of spiritual healing work. And it is my pleasure to finally see your face, for one, and to introduce Shaytan Noir. She is an author of several books, a journalist, 25 years of cryptozoology. She's a lead investigator for the Michigan chapter of North American Dogman Project. She has a podcast, Into the Liminal Abyss, a paranormal investigating team, the Michigan Center of Unexplained Events and Phenomenon. She teaches and lectures and flying cryptids, Bigfoot, and lake monsters. Where do you get the time?
Oh, well, I'm self-employed for one, so pretty much it's up to me to earn my paycheck, so that's pretty much the deciding factor on everything I do. So, but lots of research and just having my ear to the ground to where new reports are coming from and what kind of things are being reported.
You just fascinate me. I'm not going to lie. I've been looking forward to this.
Everyone in this room has a passion for the paranormal. I don't know if it's as much as what you do, though, because your work really takes you all over, and the research that you do is extensive.
Well, I do a lot of research, but for the last couple of months, it's been a lot of digital research, interviewing people over like through emails, with the libraries being closed down, ordering books from Amazon, or finding free copies on like Hulu, or not Hulu, Hoopla is the library service where you can get books for free and download them. And so just reading as much as I can and researching, and but talking to real people also helps, because you get that. It's always good to compare notes and to see what other people have experienced or researched, and compare it to your own research and see what the common connectors are, and or the deviance of, could this be leading us into a new case where somebody is reporting a new sighting of something and it hasn't been documented before.
The book that Mary has in her hand, read the title, Mary.
Mothman and Other Flying Creatures of the Midwest.
Yes.
Now, in that book, you did a lot of, you had interviews with people, so it's their testimony in the book. I love that part of it.
Yeah, I really, that's one of the things that I am very adamant about with any of the books that I write, is finding people who have done a long research into certain creatures, because not everybody researches all cryptid creatures. Some people just specialize in Bigfoot, or they just, specialize in Mothman or lake monsters, but they even hone it down even more, so that it's, some people just, if they have a certain like creature in there, like for instance, the Ohio grassman. Yes, we know it's a Bigfoot, but it's a little bit of a variant of a Bigfoot because of its color and its behavior towards humans. And there are people who just research that cryptid. The same with the legend of Boggy Creek or Momo or the Honey Island swamp monster. These are creatures that are well known in that area that people, yes, there's all these other different cryptids, but they focus primarily on that cryptid and they research it. And that's what I do with my books is I find people who have done long-term investigations into different cryptids, and it's really their expertise that I'm asking for with the interviews that I do, and then they go into the book, and so you're getting actual, and nobody's really an expert in anything of high strangeness or cryptids or UFOs or the paranormal, because you can invest something for years, but until you have the cut and dry evidence that can be scientifically proven over and over again, then it's really hard to call yourself an expert. You can be very, very well versed in that subject and have years of experience and knowledge, but tomorrow you're going to learn something new.
Yeah, hopefully.
That you've never experienced before. And so that's kind of where I pump the brakes on calling anybody an expert in these fields. But there are a lot of people who have vast amounts of experience and knowledge and who have done years of research, and they are the foremost people to go to ask these questions about these different topics.
Yeah, we're going to spend more time talking about Bigfoot, and you hit on some of the names. The Ohio Grassman. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's the same creature just by different names. I know Sasquatch is one of the names, of course, and then they call it hairy giant, skunk ape.
Skunk ape is more Louisiana and Florida. What
right.
you have to understand with Bigfoots, it's kind of like with skunks. So here in Michigan, we know our skunks are black and white, and they have that classic Pepe Le Pew look to them. But in other areas of the country, the skunks are a little bit different size. They might have a different color pattern, but they all do the same thing. If you get close enough to them, you're going to stink to high heaven for the rest of the year or until you find a solution to get it off. But they're all skunks. But some people might call them stinkers, or some people call them kitties, which is really, really bad because they're not cats. They're not kittens. And that's like the funniest thing you can actually do to a kid. But like the worst thing is, go grab those kittens. They're not kittens. And no, I've never done that, but it's a good idea. And no, I don't have any children, so
as long as it's not your own kids, because when they get sprayed, they got to come back into it.
Right.
When we had Phil Shaw in here, the Bigfoot guy, he said you might smell a Bigfoot before you see it.
And that's common with anything. There are a lot of creatures out there. Skunks are one, but foxes. There's a lot of different animals that they produce the same obnoxious odor. And because we're all very familiar with that skunk smell, whether they've sprayed outside your house or you've driven past one that's been hit, everybody can recognize that skunk smell. But there's very similar smells. Catnip can have that smell. Foxes will produce that smell. Marijuana produces that smell. I hate marijuana, but it produces that smell. And so when you're out in the woods and you're hiking and you start smelling that, you have to go through that checklist fast, because whether it's a Bigfoot or a skunk, you want to be at a distance.
I've heard of marijuana being like skunky smelling.
Yes. That's why they call it skunk weed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't bring none with you, though.
No, I don't.
You hate that
I
stuff.
hate that
I
stuff.
know you talked about
Hate
it before. I know.
Ugh.
And then there's still some other names too. I'm kind of fascinated with these names because the abominable snowman. Is it the same thing?
That's more what they consider a Yeti.
Yeti?
And that is actually, it was never meant to be called the abominable snowman, but because when the message was sent from the Himalayas back to Europe, because it had to be sent through a couple different telegraph services, and nobody with the words being translated from one language into another, it kind of got jumbled. And so when it finally arrives in Europe, they're translating it to this abominable snowman. And a lot of people, they think, Bigfoot, but it's actually, it's its own variation in the bipedal primate. And it's more what we would consider the Yeti that lives in that part of the world.
Little different than our Bigfoot
Yeah.
Sasquatch. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And a lot of people like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer with, the bumble. That's what's kept it going all these years is one the creature, but also the it's not even a cartoon, it's a claymation, I think.
Right. It's kind of more of
Yeah.
a lovable type
Yeah.
of creature. Kentucky has Bearilla.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that more of a dog man, or do you know? Bearilla?
That is one of those where I put it in the box with a question mark, because it depends on the eyewitnesses who have seen it and what their description is. So with Bigfoots, we look for telltale signs: height, coat color. Did it have noticeable ears? Did it have a big butt? Did it have a tail? What did its legs look like? Were they human-like? Or were they, what you would think a werewolves would be? These are deciding factors on whether it's a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or a dog man. Did you see ears? Did you see a pronounced snout? Did it have a tail? Okay, that's a dog man.
Right.
They're both very big bipedal creatures in the woods, but then we have some, there'll sometimes be these question mark areas where the people are like, no, that's not what it was. It was, and they give a different description, and so suddenly you're working, with a whole nother set of facts. But I will say this, with a mom who works with black bears, it is a well-known fact with anybody who knows black bears that they can walk on their hind legs and can do so for as long as they please.
Right. Yeah. And they're huge.
They can be. Yeah.
The Kodiak bear is huge.
Yeah.
Very big. Right. Now the Ojibwa called Bigfoot Wild Man, as did Chinese. They both referred to as Wild Man. So I just think that's interesting, the different names. Even the Aztecs had a name for Bigfoot, Numic. Mm-hmm. And these sightings go back way back.
But there's one that you're missing, and this is kind of interesting because with the Native American tribes in the Southwest, they were encountering a Sasquatch that they called the Wendigo, and it was actually cannibalistic. Now that creature is different in theory than what we encounter here in the Great Lakes and up into Canada, where it's more of a demonic entity that takes over a human being and causes them to do really horrific things with an insatiable hunger. So they cannibalize themselves, they cannibalize anybody who's close to them. But in the Southwest, the Native American tribes, there was a population of Sasquatches that they referred to as Wendigo, and they had reddish hair, and they were known cannibals. And they actually have found caves where there were large bipedal primate bones, but there were also smaller human bones. Something was eating something.
I wanted to fill the studio with hairy bipeds, but we have to settle for me. I'm not quite as hairy. I was able to get a haircut.
Oh,
finally, I'm feeling more human. Well, I should have brought my pen so I could take notes. I'll take notes on the podcast because I'm interested in that without a doubt. In every continent, every culture, except Antarctica, has.
Yeah, Antarctica is really, there are humans who have been there, and throughout the decades, it's actually become haunted because of the human populations. But really, for things that live there, you're looking at orcas, you're looking at seals, you're looking at things that can survive those very cold depths. But here's one that I'm going to throw at you. Did you know that there is actually marine reptiles that could survive those temperatures?
Oh. Because
they had a insulating layer of fat. So trapped in the ice in some pocket of the world, there may be a plesiosaur, pilosaur, mosasaur, or something of that nature, still preserved in ice to this day. We just haven't come across it yet because it's trapped in the ice.
It totally surprises me because I researched how many reptiles there are in Michigan because of our cold temperatures here, and because of you and the lake monsters. You know, another one of your books, Lake Monsters and Creatures of the Great Lakes. Another great book. I love that book. And Mothman too. Now you really packed Mothman with information, but I don't want to move off of a Bigfoot yet because I want people to understand. I have friends and a Facebook friend in Ireland, and then Ireland's referred to as the island, the Emerald Island, and I really think that Michigan should be called the Emerald Peninsula. I mean, both peninsulas are just covered with forest. You know, I made this map up.
Well, I do want to say the map on your shirt is not accurate there. You can tell the Yoopers kind of like picking on the lower peninsula there,
Yeah.
I think, a little bit.
This part right here of the Upper Peninsula is just loaded.
Well, what I always tell people is, you know, people question whether a Bigfoot or a large, you know, predator can live in certain areas. Here's the thing. If you have within your state any areas that have farms, that grow corn, that draw deer, rabbits, or anything else, you have the potential for a big predator to be there, because what feeds and kills on the deer other than humans and like dogs or canines? A Bigfoot, a dog man, mountain lions, things of these natures.
Right, wolves, coyotes.
Yes.
Right. Now that's what it says. It says prime real estate, dense forests, swamps, vast farmland, plenty of fresh water, never more than 6 miles from water, rivers, streams, inland, 4 Great Lakes.
And Michigan has a, even though we have a shorter growing season, we have lots of orchards, lots of fruit farms and things of those natures. And depending on what part of the state you're in, like over towards me, we have more apple orchards. But I know over here, you guys have more of the blueberry, blackberry farms.
Right.
And going up north, you have even more of a variety because their growing season is a little bit off for ours. So, you know, you're looking at creatures that have a free will and can move wherever they want. So they just follow the crops as they come in.
Phil Shaw seemed to think they like to stay by the rivers.
Rivers are, as long as they are not rapids, rivers are very easy traffic for any creature to, if you're walking, to travel and not leave tracks. If you're in the river itself, it's any tracks that are left are going to be, you know, with the water current, they're going to be washed away. You might find some along the banks, but rivers are very good areas of traffic.
Well, along with that, it's also a water source, and you know your prey is going to come
Yes.
to water as well.
Right,
So.
right. 14 billion trees in Michigan. I'm wondering who counted them.
Well,
I wouldn't want that
Forest
jo-
Service?
That's tedious work.
That's a lot of counting.
Yeah, 20 million acres of forest in Michigan. 19 million of those acres are considered timberland. And so 53% of Michigan is forest. At one time, 95% of Michigan was forest before the lumber industry took over. So this is prime real estate for Bigfoot and Dogman, like you say. It's no wonder that we have, I got us as 4th in the nation for Bigfoot reports. I don't know if you have a higher number than that.
I think we're between 4 and 7. I think it depends on who's collecting the data and what reports they're looking at, and if they have any biases, like my state has more. But I would put us within that 4 to 7 area, just because there's some give and take. Especially like within the last, 4 months, because not that many people were traveling. And as we know from news reports around the world, animals started coming back into civilized areas. And so
More
it's
and more
not
all the time.
And so with the human presence being drawn back, the wild aspect is going to flourish. And so that's when you get more, not just the Bigfoots and Dogmen, but you get everything that is not human is going to flourish because they don't have to worry about any predation from humans. I'm sure they were almost, questioning where the humans were because there was such a drawback. And these, with it being springtime and everything, I'm thinking that a lot more babies were able to be born and make it to adulthood, and less of them were getting hit by cars, things of that nature. So it's really interesting, and I wish we did have like CCTV cameras everywhere so that we could see how these creatures functioned without our presence.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan, like I say, prime real estate, and you said there are some discrepancies, whether we're 4th or 7th, but I had us down as having even more Dogman.
Yeah, so some of the experts are saying that we have more of a Dogman presence, and from talking to different investigators, both Bigfoot and Dogman, what we have all come to the conclusion of is when the Dogmen move into an area or a territory, the Bigfoots move out.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Because in theory, the Bigfoots are more solitary. And if you have a mom with children, she's going to have a family group, but the males might be very solitary, and they only come into a group setting when they can breed. But if you look at wolves, coyotes, foxes, even dogs, even, we have a basis for the understanding and the thinking of dogmen are actually a pack creature. So if you have dogmen and move into an area, everybody says Bigfoot could win against dogman, against one dogman. If you're taking on a pack of 5,
Yeah.
no,
Right.
you're not going to win that fight. I don't care how big the Bigfoot is. The dogmen are going to figure it out because they are a pack hunter. They have figured out throughout their lifetimes, throughout their generations, how to take down any predator or any prey. And whether it's a deer, whether it's a cow, whether it's a bison or a moose, whether it's a human being or a dogman, they have hunting techniques to do this.
Now that tape that I played, that should be an example of part of their language, but they have other ways of communicating.
With Bigfoots, yes, there's been documents of the different howls that they do, but there's also recordings of what they call the samurai chatter, which is like, blah, 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 blah. And it's really interesting to hear. It's almost like, and the younger generations are going to be like, what? When we used to have the old CD tapes and we'd fast forward it and or rewind it. That's what
I have another example of this.
That's what that samurai.
I have
chatter.
another example of the samurai.
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear that or not.
So yeah,
Oh,
it's
wow.
they have developed their own communications, and when you look at the human skeletal features and our muscular features and how we are developed compared to one of the great apes or orangutans or anything of that nature, we all have vocal cords. So it is not too far of a fetch of thinking that they could actually start adapting to human speech because they have learned to mimic. They have learned to mimic different bird sounds to communicate, distress sounds of other animals to draw in other animals.
They do whistles.
Yes, they do whistles. So if they can make all these vocalizations, then it's not unheard of or that far out of an idea that they could actually start to learn human speech. Parrots do it.
Yeah, I had a bird that had said 17 different phrases.
Yes.
Sentences.
Which can sometimes get you into trouble depending on what they're saying.
Well, because they pick it up without you trying to teach them, right?
Yes.
Once they start learning. So I have whistles, knocks, growls, the whoop, howls,
Yep.
high-pitched screams, the samurai chatter, which you did a nice example of. I like that. The most compelling evidence is what? What is it? The footprint? What do you think the most compelling evidence for Bigfoot?
We definitely are collecting, more and more footprints. And like Dr. Jeff Meldrum and Cliff Bacharach are they are the foremost, investigators on foot track research. And they have a vast collection. So they are the ones that I would look to for, information on foot tracks. But we are finding more and more foot tracks. But a lot of it goes into evidence collection. And you have to if you're going to be a field researcher, you have to learn how to collect evidence without compromising it or tampering with it, in the fact that you're getting your DNA on it, because that can affect the lab results. So if you're going out in the field and you're going to do this research, you have to have what I call your Cryptozoologist Forensic Kit, where you have rubber gloves, you have casting material, you have containers, whether they're plastic or paper, depending on what you are collecting. Obviously, you don't want to put scat in a paper bag because it's going to it's going to seep through. So that's where you want to have those Ziploc bags. But for like hair and stuff like that, depending on how fine it is, craft stores are wonderful for getting all your different supplies. But you want to have things like, you want to have tweezers, hemostats, just different things that will help you in the field collect this evidence so that you are not compromising it, and you can send it off to a DNA lab, or you can send it to somebody who does the eDNA and get those answers that everybody is looking for.
So do they have DNA evidence for Bigfoot?
There is different reports of them finding evidence that has DNA that is almost human, but not quite. There's that question mark area of there's something else with this. And it's a comparative study when you're doing DNA of you compare your evidence finding to what's already been. So if somebody were to collect my DNA, they would use that as a comparison of like an ancestor who had passed away, and we exhumed the body to see if there was any comparison DNA. But my DNA that you would collect off me, let's say my miniature pincher has short hair, but let's say she had long hair, and you collected multiple strands that contained both my hair and her hair. Well, one would show up as being human with my DNA, one would show up with her DNA, and they would, you'd have to discriminate which one was the human, which one was the canine.
Under evidence, I had encounters, of course, the sightings, and a lot of times it's by hunters.
Yes.
They'll be up in a line somewhere.
I have heard lots and lots of stories over the years of hunters who go out and they're in their stands and they have an experience that they cannot, they see something, or they have an encounter with something and they can't explain it, and that is the very last time they've ever gone hunting. That's
what I was going to ask. It's like, how long does it take for you to get the courage to come down off that deer stand? Off that
some
stand,
people, it's a long time. Some people, they actually, they will call people to come, to come get them. Without really relaying, I think there's a bear in the area. So, the people come in to chase off the bear and bring them back. And then later they say, no, it wasn't a bear. I think it was a Bigfoot. But they never want to go hunting again.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them one bit. When we had Phil Shaw on here, he talked about, because I want to bring up nests or shelters. And he said, well, they don't really need a nest or a shelter. But I think they do if they're having babies.
Well, the concept of having a nest, a shelter, is so that, and I, little back history, for years I bred and showed miniature pinchers. Now, this is the first time in 10 years that I've had a litter of puppies. But it was like a reschooling, because these current babies, they're less than a week old, but they, the whelping box was not containing them. They were literally popping out dee-dee, dee-dee, dee-dee. And it's like, get back in there, get back in there. So the primary purpose of a nest of any type is to contain your young but to keep predators, something that can kill your young, out. And so with young, when until they're old enough to actually walk beside you, you want them close by. You want them contained so that you know exactly where they are, and you have one site, one location that you have to protect. If a predator comes along, you want it so that your baby's behind you, it's safe, and you can deal with any predator that comes along. And so that's where this nest, you will see the nest that they build. But deer do the same thing, and you wouldn't think that deer need
I've
a
seen where
nest.
deer bed down, right?
Yes, but they bed down, they break down the grass, and so they actually are hiding themselves visually from other predators. Scent-wise, they can't really hide themselves unless they roll in mud or dung or stuff like that, or they go through a swamp and get that yucky smell to them. But that's what the purpose of a nest is to contain your young, but also to give you a protective boundary so that if you have to defend against a predator who's coming in like, I smell young, I'm going to, get an easy meal. Mom's there to say, no, you're not taking my baby. I can protect.
Apparently, they're well hidden. Most of the sightings seem to be males. What they're figuring, male Bigfoots.
Yeah, males or a mom with a offspring who is being difficult. As a mom says, okay, it's time to get a move on, and baby still wants to grab 3 more apples and be dropping them and fidgeting with them while mom's trying to, let's get. For my sighting, I couldn't tell whether it was a male or a female. All I saw was the 2 hairy legs, and then the waist of the creature, the chest of the creature, the head and shoulders of the creature was taller than where I was sitting in my vehicle. So that kind of, for me, I don't know if I saw a male or a female, but I do know I saw 2 very shaggy, thick, hairy legs that should have been tree trunks, but they were, covered in fur, so they were tree trunks.
Shetan saw Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So could you tell what color it was? The color?
It was the best way I can describe it is the same color as a brownie. It's black, but it's brown.
Right.
So it was, or I guess in dog colors, you would call that color seal. But that's what I would reference the color as, is brownie colored, because it wasn't black, but it wasn't brown. It had that kind of filter in between of, being a mix of both.
Where were you when you saw it?
I was actually up in Minnesota, and I was just coming off of the 2-lane highway from Ely, Minnesota, going up onto the 4-lane highway that goes past Virginia. Yes.
In Michigan, we have national forest, state forest, county forest. We have a lot of trees, like I said,
Yes.
billions. Have you ever been in the woods and got lost?
No, because I like to stick to my trails.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be one of those people who ends up on a 411 report.
Oh, yeah.
Generally, when I'm out hiking, and I'm very selfish about my hiking, because if I'm going hiking, I want to see something cool. I want to see cool rock formations, waterfalls, things of that nature. Big, huge trees that, or things that make me think I'm like on a magical journey, and I'm going to encounter something around the next corner. To me, growing up in Michigan, and as a child, always going out in the woods and whether we were exploring in the woods or riding my horse in the woods or going berry picking in the woods, it's very boring now to see tree, path, tree, path, pond, tree. I want to see, cool rock formations, cool waterfalls, stuff like that. And so, and Michigan has a little bit of that, but not really. So I really like, there's some trails in Indiana, Ohio that I love to go on, and my little girl likes to go on. My miniature pincher loves to go on. So the UP has some cooler trails than the lower part of the state. I will say that.
Okay, yeah. I've been lost a couple times. I'll admit it, out hunting, and it's a scary feeling when you're in the dense trees there and everything looks the same.
Yes.
You're not even sure what direction you're going anymore. Now, I think we covered evidence pretty good, because you hit on some of those things already. There's thousands of photos, footprint castings, handprints, hand castings, body impressions. You said scat. People are collecting that. Yeah, hair. I don't know if you bring little baggies with you, I guess, to be prepared for that sort of thing.
And that's, if you're going to do evidence collecting, that's something that you have to kind of anticipate, unless you're very good at knowing what kind of scat you're looking at. Obviously, if it's large and it's human-like, there's not too many people who are regularly taking, restroom breaks out on the trails. So, and especially if it's a trail
depending where you're at.
especially
You gotta go.
especially if it's a trail that not a lot of people are hiking on. So,
Yeah. They don't allow that in some places. You take everything with you.
or you bury it 6 inches in, which depending on the trail that you're on, that can be kind of hard.
Or just go to California. You can do it right in the middle of the street.
I see, there you go.
So there's a long list of evidence. I mean, I don't know how unsubstantiated it is. And then sightings go back, like we said, centuries. They're worldwide, every culture. But sightings a lot of times go unreported, like so much of the paranormal. Whether you see a ghost, a UFO, whatever, people don't want to be thought of as being crazy.
Exactly. And what a lot of people have to understand is just because there's not reports in an area doesn't mean that there's not a cryptid in that area. In order for a report to happen, a human being has to witness something and then make it back to civilization and either report it or not report it. But that's where we have, that question mark of sightings is how many people are actually seeing things, but they don't report it, and how many people see things and do report it. And then how many people actually see things and then never make it back to report it. Whether it's because they got injured on the trail, or another predator took them out, or a human being took them out. So there's quite a few question marks right there.
Well, I have diet on my list, but I want to talk about this here that I made. Whether you think this might be unreasonable. This is 23 inches total from toe to heel. And this is because of what I read and what Phil Shaw, when he was in here, he had actually said 24 inches, but I made this 23.
Let's see. Nobody has their cell phones on there. If you look, so there's two individuals in professional wrestling that I'm familiar with, Andre the Giant, and then the Big Show. And I think Shaq falls into this category.
Probably.
Their shoe size is over a size 18. So that's a sizable foot. So within the human population, we have foot sizes so I'm a size 10, and for me, all my life, ever since I was like a teenager, you have big feet. You have big feet. Everybody says you have big feet. And I'm like, okay, size 10 is pretty big. I mean, but then, my cousin, who I love dearly, has size 13 feet, and I'm like, okay, so your feet are even bigger than mine. But then you have these professional athletes, whether they're pro wrestlers or football players or basketball players, who have even bigger feet. So in the human population, we have foot sizes that are bigger than average. And actually, that's the new normal. The size 6 that everybody, that's the perfect foot size. That's not normal anymore. That's actually considered, what's wrong with you? You have tiny feet. So within the human population, we have these bigger foot sizes. So if you look at the Bigfoots, most of the Bigfoots that people are reporting are a size between 8 foot tall and 12 foot tall, which is right around where some of these basketball players are. And so if you comparatively, you put on a couple more 100 pounds of muscle and bulk, then you have your Bigfoot, and you can have a foot size that big.
I'm wondering, now Kodiak has a claw that's anywhere from 3 to 5 inches. Wouldn't this thing have a claw on it, or some kind of toenail?
They would have toenails like a human does. So if you've ever been to the zoos and you actually get a chance to see some of the primates up close, whether they're in their indoor enclosures or they're out lounging around in the sun or whatever, you can look at their hands, you can look at their feet, and they have toenails just like we do. but they are groomed back because they use.
Oh, sure, they wear it off. I'm sure.
Yes, they
right?
use their hands, their feet for making their living. Whereas for like human females, we tend to grow out our nails and paint them and everything like that, because we have a more sophisticated lifestyle where we're not actually using our hands to break bones and stuff like that. So it's kind of the difference between being domesticated and non-domesticated. Humans are very domesticated. We wear clothing, we use tools, we brush our hair, we put on makeup, we brush our teeth, we do our nails, and if we don't do it ourselves, then we go pay somebody to do it. Whereas if you were in a tribe of chimpanzees or gorillas or stuff like that, yes, there is bonding that goes on where they groom each other, but they're not doing each other's nails. They're not taking plants and putting makeup on one another. They're not doing that.
I could see him wearing them down. I do buy
Yes.
that. And before we leave evidence, I want to say sightings, because there have been sightings in Grand Rapids, right here in Kent County, Ottawa, Muskegon, Allegan, Barrie, Ionia, Jackson County, Oscoda County, and the hot spots are like Sheboygan, Black River, West Branch. That's where Phil Shaw
Yes.
was from. And
West Branch is a huge hotspot, and they are actually the Bigfoot capital of Michigan. I believe that's their claim to fame. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Rifle River, China, Russia, Himalayan mountain range. Those are all like where a lot of sightings are. But yeah, in this area close to us, so it's pretty amazing that they've been that close, really. Diet. I want to move on to diet because you kind of mentioned diet briefly of what the Bigfoot might eat.
So a Bigfoot is an omnivore, so they are not going to pass up a food opportunity. So here in Michigan, we have, like we discussed, we have, our
Fruit,
farms.
berries.
We have
corn.
corn farms, but we have pumpkin farms, we have apple orchards, berry, farms, and in those apple orchards, you have peaches, pears, cherries. Michigan is known for, different types of food crops. But we also have deer.
Deer, you said that, and elk seems to be one of their favorite meals.
We have a vast population of deer, but we also have rabbits, squirrels, chipmunks, raccoons, possums. We have the canines, we have the mountain lions, which are actually a little bit easier to avoid the Bigfoots. But then we also have salmon, we
Yep.
have smelt, we have perch, we have freshwater clams. We have a vast food resources, and then we have our dumping grounds where the trash goes.
Yeah, where
Which
the black
is-
bears hang out.
Yeah, which is where you think about if these dumpsters were left open. Think of how many creatures go in there, and the Bigfoots are no different. You think that they're going to pass up a free meal?
Roadkill is on my
I was
list.
saying,
Yes,
just
roadkill.
the advice. Don't do the John Candy in the Great Outdoors if you see a Bigfoot or a bear. He puts the candy bars on the car and drives off with like 3 bears on his car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're omnivores. They are going to take whatever easy meal. If it's a fresh roadkill, they'll either they'll make fast work of that, or a dog man or a wolf or a coyote or something will make off with parts of that roadkill, depending on how much is left of it after it's been hit by the car. But yeah, they are an equal opportunity eater.
Fish,
Where-
poultry, you said.
Yes.
And then, you know what? I got a couple other things on my list. Women and children.
It depends on. This is where those 411 reports come in. So if you make yourself a prey item, obviously you're a prey item, and that holds true for Bigfoots, dogman, bears, wolves, mountain lions, anything that is big enough or hungry enough to take you down is going to. And that applies to going out in the water too. Now in the Great Lakes, we don't have sharks, we don't have alligators, but down
A lot
south,
of salmon.
Well, sometimes
You
we
know.
do get sharks coming up into.
No,
they've
that's-
come up into Lake
Oh,
Michigan.
bull shark.
No,
Yeah.
heard
that
of bullshit.
it only happened once.
Yeah, it's very rare, like the
And-
hurricanes.
But there's locks and gates
Yeah.
all up and down the
Yeah.
Mississippi and the Illinois River because they're trying to control the silver carp population. So anything after 1960 is kind of a hoaxed report
Okay.
for a shark coming into the Great
Yeah.
Lakes.
No bull sharks in Michigan?
No.
I'm going to have to look at your book up again.
There was one report right there in the Chicago area where a gentleman had been bit, and they claimed that there was a dorsal fin spotted. Now, yes, a bull shark can live in fresh water, but our Great Lakes around the coastline is the warmest parts. So if there was a bull shark cruising the shallow parts, people would be reporting this like constantly. But our Great Lakes only stay warm in July, August, and depending on the heat into September. But the winds cool down the water very, very quickly. So a bull shark actually goes catatonic once it starts going into 60 to 40 degree water. And our lakes hit that real fast.
I could see if somebody maybe getting it mixed up with a giant carp or
A sturgeon
catfish
or something like
or
that.
sturgeon that never stopped growing, right? I think we covered Bigfoot really well.
I did want to cover another thing on the diet because Phil Shaw, when we
Okay.
had him, he was talking about one of the reasons we don't find them is because he believes they're cannibalistic. So that way
Right.
they eat, if they eat the dead, so then you much harder to find the remains.
Which
But of
falls
course,
into what you were
remains
saying
disappear
about
very
out west.
quickly in the wild, just on its own because
Yeah.
of how
Well, the thing about it is, so skeletal frames, bones are made up of mostly calcium, and then you've got a lot of trace elements that are not easily found in the wild. So when animals come across any type of skeleton, they will take whatever parts they can carry to gnaw on them to get that calcium, particularly mothers or pregnant mothers. Calcium is a very, very hard commodity to find in the wild. So a lot of rodents, raccoons, possums, stuff like that, canines, when they come across a skeleton, they will grab every bone that they can get to chew on it. And that's actually how we have found different fossilized like teeth and bones in caves, is because the smaller creatures have drugged them into the caves, trying to stockpile them as a resource, and then either they get killed or something happens so that they can't get back into the cave, and so that is kind of preserved for history. And so that's actually how we found different teeth over the years, is because rodents have collected them and taken them and hid them, and then we as humans find them.
Right. Anything else on Bigfoot?
I don't have anything.
Okay, well, there's so many other cryptids that you are involved with, some of the names are just like Snallygaster. It's one of them.
Well,
that's
the
just funny to me.
Snallygaster, I included it
So
in my book, and it's kind of a creature of folklore that I believe the moonshiners
Right.
created, because if they came up with this reason for people not to go into the woods,
they won't find the stills.
exactly. And so, but they had to come up with reasons why there would be billowing smoke or loud bangs, from their moonshine stills. So they came up with these reasons that, the Snallygaster's doing that, and
Because it was a fire-breathing dragon, right?
Yes. And so I just thought that was very inventive and resourceful of the moonshiners. So that I actually do have a chapter in the book about the Snallygaster, just because it was like, well, it is folklore, but I can see the whole process of
I
why
love
they
the
would
details.
And
why
that's-
they would come up with this creature.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of, like the legends and stuff, because even like back then it'd be like parents wanting to keep their kids
Yes.
from going into the, because
Oh,
there is
right.
actual predators in the woods, but you make this big scary animal.
Yes.
Sure.
So then
Stay
they're
out of
afraid
the
to go
woods.
in there. So then that legend builds, because that passes on to their kids and it builds on as it goes.
Yeah,
As
the bump in
stories
the
do,
night
you know.
theories is
Yeah.
But explains the fire and smoke from the still if it's a fire-breathing dragon. Gargoyles. Brandon, can you grab that gargoyle and maybe get it a little closer to
Well,
the camera?
let's see if I can do it without losing
your
my mic. 'Cause my
mic?
mic's broken, so
Oh. Or can you?
I'll set it down here. Okay, it's holding now. Now it's going.
It's
Mary brought this. Mary has a collection of gargoyles.
I do.
So
I love gargoyles.
I knew you
I do
guys would
too.
get along
Love them.
when we were talking on the radio. That's so cool. That's one of your smaller ones, right?
That's the small one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I have bigger ones.
You just got one for a gift.
I did. I get all sorts of gargoyles. For some reason, I get gifted. my husband buys me several, and then my friend Kristen Roberts, she gave me a small one that was out of her garden when she was moving because I kept touching it.
Uh-huh.
So she knew that I liked it. And then over several years, I've just kind of collected them. My daughters bring them to me. When I had a reading done, and he painted a painting for me, and there was a black creature behind me. He's like, I'm not sure what this is. And then a couple of weeks later, my daughter brought me a gargoyle that she had bought, and it was the exact same picture, holding the same thing. I'm like, oh, because he goes, you have this in your energy, it protects you. So I think gargoyles.
And that's
are
what they
a
were
big part of my
for,
life.
protection. You know, there's 3 types: animal, human, and then grotesque, the scary kinds. They put them on top of churches to make them so scary that they would scare evil away.
Well, kind of the Batman theory, you know.
Yeah, gargoyles. I wouldn't want to run into one of those. You had a story about a gargoyle, somebody that thought they saw one.
Well, and I do believe he did. So I was at a convention, the Butler County Paranormal Convention that's in Pennsylvania. And I had just got done doing my presentation, got back to my table, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, I'm so glad you talked about the Chicora gargoyle or the Butler County gargoyle. And I said, oh yeah, I said, that's, one that I've been researching. He said, I've seen it. And I said, what? He said, I've seen it. And I hadn't quite finished my Mothman book yet. So I said, do you want to give me your report? He said, yeah. So I gave him my business card, and it was interesting, as I was driving home, which it was like a 7-hour drive home, he was emailing me his account of it. And so the story goes, he was driving down a rural country road, and he was driving past these people's house, and there was what he thought at the time was this gigantic concrete gargoyle.
Yeah, lawn ornament.
And he thought, that is the coolest, Halloween decoration I've ever seen.
Right.
That must have cost them a lot of money. And as he's driving past it, he notices the head turns and watches him drive past. And then as he's going past him, he's like, what the hell am I seeing? He notices a commotion in his rear view mirrors, and he's not quite sure, but he believes that it's at that moment that it decides to launch itself up in the air. So now I can't remember if he says in the report that if the house was vacant or somebody was living there, but the next morning he's driving back past that house, and he's like, oh, I'm going to get to see if that thing's still there, and it's completely gone. And so the interesting thing to me was, he said there was no, because this, if it was made out of concrete or marble or anything like that, it has to weigh quite a bit. That's a heavy object.
Yeah.
That's going to, because I know with working with my dad on different stuff, when we're using his tractors, we're rutting up the ground with it. If we're trying to pick up big logs or stuff like that, it's rutting. So I'm thinking if they pulled it somewhere or they picked it up or something, there would have been a physical mark left on the
Yeah, you
ground.
would have seen that.
And he said he didn't say in his report that there was any marks seen. So he was very convinced that he saw what had been reported for a while as this gargoyle creature.
Flying cryptid.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I couldn't imagine it's flying after me. I'd be driving off the road for sure.
Well, I have a question about one of the flying cryptids in your book. When I do my psychic readings, I read with a Native American deck. One of my favorite cards in that deck is the Thunderbird. And for me, I always pull it, and it tells me that the people are well protected, that even though the Thunderbirds brought in the storm, they also protected the people from the storm. So when I read the story that you have in here about the Thunderbird that comes in and takes a 65-pound child, that kind of That kind of
Right.
creeps
That's
me
one of the
out.
most famous
there's-
Thunderbirds.
So
right?
there is a separation between Native American legends of the Thunderbird and what it is, and that kind of varies depending on location. Here in the Great Lakes, it is the enemy of the underwater panther, and so it kind of controls what the other underwater panther does with, storms in the lakes, because in order to get from shore to shore, people had to cross in canoes, and that was you would pray to the spirit gods, the Manitou, to protect you from the other, and that was the Thunderbird's job. But in other parts of the country, he was more of a predator, and he would eat braves, warriors. But the Thunderbird that they're talking about in the Illinois report is actually a flesh and blood bird that they are not sure if it was a condor or what it was, because if you read the description of it, it's a dark body with a white ring of feathers around the neck.
Hooked beak.
Hooked beak. So in most people, I'll pull the room. What would you, if I gave you that description and said it was a bird big enough to carry off a child, what would you say?
Well, it sounds like some kind of a predator, scavenger.
Okay, but
Condor?
yes. Okay, so you would say condor. What would you say?
There's a lot of big. I'm just trying to think with the hook. I'm not really a bird expert, but
Okay.
So, but-
Well,
Something like a vulture?
Vulture,
okay.
right?
So we would all come up with this big raptor type bird.
Raptor, right?
The strange thing is there is this, the Great Lakes are not a known territory for those birds. But if we travel back many, centuries down in South America, at one time there was a bird that was, they say it was more, it would have looked like a modern day raven, but it was called Argentinus magnificent. And it was a bird that could have rivaled a small airplane. Now that is a bird that's big enough
That's
and
a big
strong
bird.
enough to pick up a 65-pound child and carry it for a little distance.
Swallow them whole, I think.
Now, this is, coming from South America, but as we know, birds can travel to anywhere as long as there's not a barrier. So what's to say that there wasn't, somewhere in the South American jungles, there's not not extinct population of these birds, and for whatever reason, whether it was deforestation or fires or whatever, human encroachment, that a breeding population of them decided that they would fly as far north as they could, which would have been probably the Great Lakes, eat around here for a little while, and then fly back. If a bird has that big of a wingspan, they can do that within a day's travel. If they're on the thermals, they can glide up and,
Yeah, we really got to wrap this up. Time is up. I mean, I don't know if we're digging these coal mines and stuff are crawling out of them, exactly where all these cryptids are coming from. It's the flying cryptids that's really I'm worried about, especially if I have one following me. But lake monsters, Mothman, and Gargoyles O-My. Your books are just jam-packed. Lake monsters and odd creatures of the Great Lakes and Mothman. Read the entire...
Mothman and Other Flying Creatures of the Midwest.
Two great books. Pick those up. I want to do quick shout outs to Esther Joy, who we talked to on the radio, Kim Colleen, who's at home, Ben Goldman, who was here last, Gary, Indiana, with Pretty Boy Films from Gary, Indiana, Lisa Perrone, she's an astrologer. She's in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Phil Shaw and Rick Meyer, these are my Bigfoot guys. So
Rick is
shout
so
out
cool.
to those guys, right? Harold Richardson from Real Tennessee Ghost Hunters. Bohemian Kimmy, I know you're out there somewhere, so hi to you. Hi to the entire paranormal community. We're going to skip final thought. My final thought was Indrid Cold, but we got to say something because you're going to be back around Halloween.
Yeah.
So we gotta share some stuff. Helen Keller, I'm going to leave us with this quote from Helen Keller. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. So to everybody out there, I say, keep the faith, stay optimistic. We'll get through this together. Peace out.
The opinions expressed in the preceding program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.